using the funds in it, to, part of it from a different fund. Part of it is that we know that the solid waste has that 650 available. There aren't huge capital needs for that fund moving into the future, where the other funds do have a capital need moving into the future. And so part of it is, that's why we're trying to get that financial tool up as soon as possible. We won't be able to make that final decision if there's other alternatives where we would want to take it from until we have that financial tool up. So we're looking out 10 years, so we don't make a transfer now from a different fund and wish we didn't make that change at that time.
I guess my main concern is, when we're looking at fund balances, I've asked that question before. I mean, we've kind of got that rough guidance on your general fund. It's requested or recommended that it be at that 35%, and we're at that now, correct? Where in years past, we've been below that in the 20-25%. But no such guidance exists kind of on what a healthy fund balance for enterprise funds such as this, and I think that's something that we as a city can easily tackle and at least use as a guiding principle. We're like in this situation where we say, well, we've got close to 900,000 in the solid waste fund. We don't need to have that type of balance in that fund. So we can look to do some things like this. But I guess the bigger question is, why do we have that much money in the fund in the first place? And my concern is that when we go to look at fees, that's used as an excuse to raise fees, that, well, we don't have a sufficient fund balance. And in particular, this situation, we currently have, in my opinion, a more than sufficient fund balance. If we execute this transfer to pay for this one particular item, and then 2 years down the road, it's further evaluated that, yes, the solid waste fund needs to be at X amount. We're far below that. We need to increase fees because of that. Well, now we're making a decision that's going to impact residents that, that fund is funded through trash rates that we pay. And this is not related to trash. The community center has no relation whatsoever to residential trash rates. And I know, some council members in the past have made comments, well, it's, we're going to get you one way or the other. You're either going to pay through the debt levy or fees or whatever. But, to me, that's not a right attitude to have, especially when you're dealing with trash rates that have higher tax rates. There's a solid waste tax of, was it 9.875, and the CEC, the County Environmental Charge, which is 28% for residents and 53% for businesses. So, I mean, when we're making these decisions, they shouldn't be, I just think we need to have a full understanding of what potential repercussions could have down the road, and that some unforeseen circumstances like doing something like this could potentially have. And at that point, there may be a whole nother council on it, too. So, but I think a good starting point for all this discussion is fund balance and what the council has established as what we should be at based off of recommendations from finance. And that's obviously something that can be modified and changed. But I guess that's my big concern, is why this big chunk of money is coming out of that particular fund and what that means down the road for any future fund or fee adjustments in the solid waste fund is my concern as it relates to that specifically. And then because we're talking about the community center, I know that question has been asked in the past, and we have requested some sort of informal estimate on what things need to get fixed and what are they going to cost. And, to my knowledge, we haven't seen that yet. But I think that's probably the starting point, is to get that done. And maybe not so informal, but maybe more of a formal look at, we need to, do we send WSB down there to do an evaluation on these things? I don't know how that process works, but to me, it's pretty obvious if the roof is leaking and it needs to be replaced, we should be able to get an estimate pretty quickly from multiple vendors on what that would cost. Likewise for anything else. So I think that would be a good starting point. And like you're saying that you think that 650 is low. So, you know, that again is gonna help us try to identify where this funding is gonna be to go through that, if we wanna go through that, because I think that's also a decision that, you know, it's my opinion that we should sell the building and not have to incur these expenses, and then we can, instead of allocating money that we currently have to pay for something that we don't need, we can use that money for some of these other things that we obviously have all sorts of needs on here, and then we'll be getting an influx of cash through the sale of that unutilized city asset in the community center. So that's where I'm at for that.
I believe, City Manager, you've started the process to look at the community center, or is it in the works, or?
We've gotten, actually, Ron kind of had that up for getting the appraisals on, or the bids on the roof. I believe we have 3 of them.
Yeah, we have 2 now, we're waiting for the third one, but
Waiting for a third.
we have to do that, because it's gonna be over $175,000, we're gonna have to do a sealed bid process on it. So we'll have to get, basically,
Can we have you come up and talk to the mic, because we're not, people aren't listening, or here picking up what you're saying. Sorry to interrupt you.
Is this on? Okay. Yeah, so we have had some bids, or had some people out to look at the roof. There, looks like there's gonna be more work than just the roof that's gonna need to be addressed. It's gonna be some windows and some different things that are going on with it. So, with talking with Dan, with our purchasing policy, we have to basically get an architect to come out, look at it, kind of make a RFP for us, so we can send this out to these different roofing companies, so we can get, you know, apples to apples bids on them, because each one that came out and looked at it, you know, kind of had a little different view on it, and the roof is gonna be, you know, it's gonna be expensive to get done, so we have to look at all this other stuff too to go with it. So, like you were saying, I think we need to do a full evaluation on the whole building to kind of see where everything will be at, what we wanna do to it exactly, and you know, what needs to be done. There's skylights, there's windows, there's different things that we saw in going through and looking at this with different contractors that we need to get some more questions answered, and they're kind of above our heads as far as what we can do to evaluate them or what exactly needs to be done. So I've reached out to Morgan. He was gonna give us some contacts that hopefully we can get someone to come out and do that, or to get started on that, so we can get an RFP written up.
Morgan's right behind you.
Also, the absolutely latest information, so there's 2 different firms that we've worked with on this exact same thing, roofs on public city projects. So I'm gonna have both of those people, representatives, work with Ron directly. You can pick one, have them both do an evaluation. If you like one better than the other, we've worked with both of them equally as well, so it might come down to their price or preference in terms of, you know, who we get along with better, right? So that is just a matter of days, I think, in terms of, you know, getting in touch with those people. And WSB will share all of our stuff with respect to public bidding with their folks, so they can just kind of follow the same format that we would for a street project, but obviously you're not building a street, you're replacing a roof. So they would support that expertise, or supply that expertise.
And we're probably talking weeks before this can get,
Don't know. That might be another way to select between the 2 firms. If one thinks they can get it done faster than the other, then, you know, and we want to get it done fast, then that might be another selection kind of criteria, right? So, that's kind of what's happening right now, and Ron will have at least some phone calls to make, or I can make them, and we can get together sometime this week. That'll certainly be the start of the process. Knowing that we just kind of talked about this last week, or at the last council meeting, right? So it's when we kind of started working on it. So that's the latest.
And it'll take a while to, the guys that have come out, or the contractors that have come out and looked at it, I mean, they cut holes in the roof. They have to they have to cut holes in the roof to get the depth of the insulation, what's there. It's a process, it's not a matter of coming out and taking a couple measurements. They had metal guys out, they had, fabricators out to, check all this different stuff out. So it's a little bit of a process to get, these guys out there to do this. I mean, we've been working on it for probably a month. Probably have 40 hours into it with contractors, walking around, but, we'll head this way and, kind of get a full evaluation of the building, so.
Good.
Any questions or? All right, I'm gonna go sit back down.
Thanks, Ron.
Yeah, some of the aspects of that kind of one leads into another, to where if the roof is done, sometimes the roofers won't guarantee some of the work if some of the window flashings can't be taken care of at the same time. If there is siding issues, and as you lap over the edge of the roof, well, then you have to tear that part off if you're not going to do the roof or the siding at the same time. So there's many considerations that have to go into the work that we're looking at,
I look at the HVAC and all that.
as deep as you want to go.
Absolutely, yeah, because you've got an HVAC system that's, at its end of its useful life. You've got roof penetrations. You want to take a holistic look at this before you move forward. But I would like to address Councilmember Thorson. You brought up a lot of great ideas and a lot of great thoughts. And that's part of the benefit of this tool that we're developing for the 10-year look, is that it'll help us determine, one, if our rates have been sufficient based upon our needs. And we can't forget about our needs as part of this capital infrastructural component to it that needs to be implemented into that. In addition to that, we will be able to identify a fund balance. It's not the same as the general fund balance when we look at that and having a 35%, because part of it is it's your determination on how long you want a rate to be established. Before you make another increase into that rate. Rule of thumb is always in part of where the state auditors will always tell you that you should look at a 35 to 50% fund balance accumulation for the general fund. For an internal service fund, you usually like to have at least 4 months of your annual expenditures in your fund balance. But part of that also needs, that's just for your liquidity standpoint. It's not including what your future expenditures are going to be. That's fine. That's a fine number to look at, that 4 months, if you plan on increasing your rate on an annual basis, which is always something that in government that I always look at not doing, because you don't want to have constant impacts on the residents as it ticks up. So that'll be something that we'll be looking, at utilizing that tool. And so I think we're positioning ourselves very, very well. Even when you adopt this, and the plan would be October 19th, you still will do a final approval of all the budgets. We have not gone and looked at in detail the enterprise funds, the internal service funds, which we will do. We will also be discussing the fund balance and so forth at that point in time. As of the financial statement that was completed in 2020, all of our enterprises were positive. We're looking at that they should be positive in 2021 also. That's just kind of a quick indication that our rates are doing fine. The piece that hasn't been layered into that is your capital needs going out into the future. So again, I got to stress that we're heading in the right direction by having a comprehensive capital plan for 10 years, using this financial tool. All of that information will be brought back to the city council and looking for every question that you possibly can. And I think in the short time that I've been here, any question that the city council has asked me, I will research, come back, and I'll give recommendations because I want us to be transparent and totally open on all of our decisions and directions that we're heading into for the city.
Any other questions for Finance Director? You going to dig into it a little bit more tonight then, or do you want to
I mean, that, that's totally up to the council members. We can kind of walk through this.
Yeah, why don't you,
Yep.
we got plenty of time, so.
So the first is the vehicle and equipment replacement schedule. And you see where it has the police department, fire department, street maintenance department, urban forestry department, and the general parks. In 2020, they're looking at $110,000 for the police department. I'm actually going to go to the details so you can see where that's coming. That 110,000 is actually the handheld radios that we have had discussion on through the budget, and we're actually having them move forward with that this year. But the funding was really identified in 2022. There's enough funds that are available in the vehicle and equipment replacement account to handle that. In the fire department for 2022, and I'm just going to look at the 2022 column right now for sake of our conversation. If there's additional questions, and you want to go and look at some other years, definitely we'll answer those questions. But again, the fire department has that same need as that handheld, radios. Street department has a Sterling L8 8,500. It's a plow truck, dump truck that's up for replacement at about $280,000 for 2022. The urban forestry department has nothing that's up on the schedule for 2022. General parks have, it's even hard for me to read this thing. I have a wing mower for $80,000 and a zero turn mower for $24,000. That's earmarked for the 2022. The water department has a truck with plow for $68,500. Wastewater again has a truck with a plow at $55,000. Surface water has nothing earmarked for the 2022. The electric department, their big expenditure is a bucket truck at $265,000. And then also they have the other bigger item there is a generator that is $100,000 that's listed on the improvement plan. As we move into building and facility improvements, we have the city hall. We have a number of items, to be addressed. The fire station exterior service doors, finance service door. We've got a city hall tuck pointing and caulking project. We have to remember that the city hall is 20 years old, and so that there's some repair items that are going to be needed on an ongoing basis. The city hall antenna system, and actually that really does tie into the handheld radios component to it. It's all kind of a collective package. They utilize the antenna system. And then an HVAC control update for the city hall. Public Works building has nothing identified in 2022. Parks building, McKnight Field HVAC has $15,000. There's some various items that are door security upgrades for $8,000, municipal building cameras, upgrade of $20,000. And then we've got the community center, which we've discussed. Again, I think that it's prudent to have a whole-scale assessment done on that facility to really identify everything that's really needed in that system or in that facility. And that information will be brought back to the city council for final decisions before we move forward with anything else. We've got capital technology where we have, our computer replacement program identified on there. We have desktop phones, cameras. We have the SCADA system, computers for the SCADA system, body camera software that's being allocated out each and every year on the 10-year plan. And then there's smart boards and other technology that's needed throughout the facilities, especially in the conference rooms, and upgrading those. And then we have the
Are
pavement.
we using smart boards?
We should start.
I don't know. Is that something that's in there, smart boards?
That's inside not at this point in time.
Oh.
It is something that we're looking at as moving forward. But yeah, it's basically it's technology that it's been earmarked as smart boards, but it's really the technology in the conference rooms. And looking at whether there's interest in moving to smart boards for the future. The pavement preservation plan, I'm gonna hold off onto that because that's really part of the street plan that Morgan has brought forward and that we've seen, I think on December 21st. The numbers are all identified in here, the parking lot and so forth.
You think these are conservative numbers that you're using? Because it seems like everything's being escalated in cost right now.
I am going to ask our engineer to address that. We've had a brief discussion on it, and at this point in time, we thought that they were pretty good. We readjusted them before they went into the plan. However, that's part of the work that he's been authorized to start doing is to kind of firm up those numbers definitely before we go into the bonding. But
The only reason I ask that, it seems like everything right now is out of whack, and you go to bid something out, and could be 10% or whatever more.
I mean, even if we weren't in these times right now, it would be a very fiscally prudent question to ask, right? So, I mean, estimates are only that. They're never right. They're only estimates. And so what we do in any capital planning exercise is to try to build in some level of contingency to maybe absorb some things, like if there is some modification on the scope between now where we're just lines on a map and actually having completed some investigation and design and knowing more clearly what the needs of each of the projects might be, that we have some contingency in there for those things. And also for if the price of PVC pipe is off, the charts at the time that we go out for bids, that we can hopefully absorb that. Now, what we do, and I've talked to Dan about this, is starting with the last council meeting where you gave me some authorization to keep moving forward, as we get to individual points, which would be similar to what you're used to at the end of kind of preliminary design, we'll complete a more detailed cost estimate than what we have right now, and we'll check it against these numbers. And if these numbers are higher, we're not necessarily going to lower the projections until we get further on down the road. Now we get down to the end of final design, which is before we go out to bids. We'll have another checkpoint. If there is an appropriate point before, for example, funds from the sale of bonds, which are committed to the project or projects, Dan and I will be in close contact to be able to, so that he can understand where is the level of detail in our estimating process. It will be more detailed than what we have down right now, but is it lowering the number or does it need to raise the number? I mean, knowing that there are two different ways it could go, and that he understands the level of risk or the level of uncertainty if we have to sell the bond or consider selling the bond for a set of improvements that happens before we actually take bids and have a hard contract number on a project, which could happen too, right? So all of those things have to go in together, and there needs to be a reasonable assumption of the unknowns to be able to get at whatever the end result is. For example, taking advantage of a really good bond market with good interest rates, right? That might not line up with exactly when we might go out for bids. So we have talked about a plan and approach to share information with respect to evolving cost estimates as they get more and more accurate as we get down the line, and also to be able to evaluate as we get close to, potentially considering selling a municipal bond. Where are we? How much are the contingencies? Are we all, from a staff standpoint, comfortable with that level, which will determine potentially the amounts to fund the project? So I know that's a lot, if that makes sense, but we're trying to do the best we can, given the information that we have. Your question was, are they big enough? And given the information that we have right now, this is what we got. At the end of the process, they likely will not look exactly like this, but again, we'll have much more information at that point.
Appreciate it, Morgan. So it sounds like you had those discussions already.
Mayor, yes, we've had those discussions, and on anything, even for, a piece of equipment for that matter, our estimates could be off, and we'll end up having to adjust, but that's something that will, even for, not just the pavement preservation component to it, but for everything, that's something that we will be giving quarterly updates moving into the future. As you've adopted the plan, and let's say we're in 2022, we'll be updating on a quarterly basis to say this is how we're running against the estimates that we had prepared. So there'll be a constant communication, and we're really living in some very interesting times. And then we have the section called Ponds, Natural Resources, Environment, and the Urban Forestry has $21,000 for the Emerald Ash Borer Program. And General Parks have $25,000 listed as park reforestation, that's easy for me to say, program. Surface water and surface water have nothing listed for 2022, as well as we move to the parks, playgrounds, paths, and open space. We will be having a little bit more discussion with the Parks Commission later this month on some of the utilization between the park dedication funds versus park funds. So we have a clear understanding of what restrictions in utilization are there. And so really these are just kind of placeholders for the parks components to it at this point in time in the plan. This is staff recommendations, really needs to go through the Parks Commission before we actually finalize on an annual